song's more appropriate than it even is usually because we're going to be talking about COP-26, the climate change conference, and so much more. But this is Common Censored, the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And I'm Lee Camp, and you just heard the lovely voice of Eleanor Goldfield.
Turned into Foghorn Leghorn there for a second. The lovely voice.
No, I did not. No, I did not turn into Foghorn Leghorn. How you dare say? I turn into Foghorn.
All right. It's going to be that kind of show.
Yes, it is. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you're a member, double thank you. You get 2 thank yous if you become a member at liberapay.com/LeeCamp. But for everybody else, you get a single thank you for being here. We got a lot of topics. We're going to get into air quality, maybe mention something about Elon Musk, and a lot more. So hang on to your pantaloons, I dare say! It's a hell of a show.
I feel like he would have said britches.
Britches, not pantaloons?
Pantaloons is kind of like British, isn't it?
I don't know. I have no idea what Foghorn Leghorn. Hang on to your britches!
Yeah, so it is, we are recording this during COP26, or COP-OUT26. And
which I had to look up. I was like, I know it has to do with climate change. Why the fuck's it called COP?
Yeah.
It's like the Council of Parties or something.
Right.
Yeah, it's dumb. Stupid.
All of it's stupid. All of it is a total waste of time. In fact, if you want to see an appropriate representation of what goes on at COP, look at the image of world leaders throwing a coin into a fountain for good luck against climate. I'm not fucking kidding you. I'm so serious that this actually happened.
We can't actually do anything, but I bet this coin might just turn the tide against climate change. Pun intended, turn the tide.
It's not like they run the world or anything.
No. It's like that's very much like the Onion had a great headline. Like congressman sends out email that says, email to, subscribers or whatever, to constituents saying, you can't let this happen.
Right.
And that is like the title of these emails from the Congress people is like, you can't let this happen. No, you can't let it happen,
right.
Motherfucker. You're the one in Congress.
Right.
I'm just an idiot.
You have all of the power.
I mean, you're more of an idiot, but I mean, you have all the power. So yeah, they're sitting there and they're like, we can't really save the world, but I bet the superstition of this coin in the fountain could achieve something.
I really wish they would have thrown themselves in. But there's an interesting intersection that we're going to start with here, an intersection of news stories, if you will. So last week, we, of course, talked about Assange's trial, or I don't even like using the word trial because trial suggests there's some kind of legitimacy to the whole thing.
Hearing.
Assange's, kangaroo court precursor to a public hanging.
Yeah, kangaroo fucking is what the technical term.
Why are we like down on the kangaroos? Like, how did they get stuck with that shitty?
Look, I agree. They should be very insulted.
Kangaroos are super chill,
and they're very not corrupt, whereas kangaroo courts
I've noticed that.
very much are corrupt. Kangaroos themselves, less corruption in the kangaroo community than you would think.
I agree. I've found them to be pretty straight up.
Up and down. You walked right into that one.
Okay. Anyway, so speaking of that intersection, WikiLeaks earlier this week posted a little what do you call it? Like a
article.
Yeah, but I want to say a
compendium.
Thank you, a compendium of evidence that they have delivered
montage?
to
a stew.
that they've delivered to the people throughout the years that has to do with climate change and the environment. So, take it away, Lee.
Oh, I'm taking it away? Yeah, so they published, this is a list of some of the various things they have published over the years about climate change. Because a lot of people don't realize the breadth of everything WikiLeaks has published, all proven true, all proven, not made up. And just about any topic, you can still go to wikileaks.org, do a search. Just about any top-level human being, leaders in multiple countries, as long as they haven't, WikiLeaks has not been able to publish much in the past few years, so it has to be prior, to like 2018 or something to really find stuff. But just about every topic, just about every fucking leaders of the world, you'll find stuff about them, and this is why Assange needs to continue to be persecuted. But anyway, here's the list of some of the biggest things they've published. WikiLeaks has. They showed the COP-15 draft text that was published, and so now we're on COP-26, COP-OUT26. And something I'm going to mention on Redacted tonight when I talk about this is that even if they made really great promises in this thing, let's just, suspend disbelief, they fucking don't hold to any of them. Like, the Paris Accords, they're fucking not holding on to that. And I don't just mean America, because Trump pulled out. I mean the other countries that did not pull out are not sticking to their promises. So what the fuck's the point of this? Anyway, that aside.
Well, and also the COP-15 agreement, the reason that became kind of, there was some hullabaloo, you might say, around it. So Assange, before the the long imprisonment of Assange, he attended the climate summit in Copenhagen in 2009 and obtained a draft of the COP-15 agreement. And the text basically showed that it was devoid of any meaningful efforts to tackle global warming. Even, it's even devoid of like the lip service that you just mentioned, Lee. And the COP-15 agreement shows a substantial shift in the demands made on poorer countries. And the COP-15 agreement would ultimately be declared a, quote, incredible disaster by the EU president. And the documents show that the world leaders were asked to sign, quote, an agreement that hands more power to rich countries and sidelines the UN's role in all future climate change negotiations, end quote. So in other words, rich countries get to do whatever the fuck they want. Right. Poorer countries get the shaft as per usual, and there's no meaningful shift in policy that would actually address climate chaos. That was COP-15 in a nutshell. And unfortunately, what's happened is that the agreements have become like seemingly more robust, but as you just pointed out, Lee, no one holds to them. So it's kind of like, no, I have a very rigorous fitness plan. I'm just not losing any weight or getting healthier because I don't do it.
Yeah. It's like each year they hold up the document and they go, here are the things we have promised to do. Now, if you could shred that for me, that'd be lovely. So here's some other things that WikiLeaks has provided us. Government manipulation of countries into accepting their climate strategy. I'm going to assume that that's more often like the US and UK manipulation. Spying and surveillance was commonplace in climate discussions. Geopolitics, interfering with science-based and cooperative approach to tackling climate change. You don't say. And by geopolitics, they mean, guess what? The countries owned and operated by oil and gas, like America, were really interfering with science-based analysis, science-based plans. The U.S., number 5, the U.S. use of economic position to coerce countries into accepting genetically modified foods, GMO foods. Yeah, that was a big one. There was a lot of the State Department cables revealed immense pressure by the U.S. to force GMOs on other countries. Melting Arctic due to global warming seen as an opportunity for oil drilling. That was revealed by WikiLeaks. Middle-range powers also sought to water down climate accords. So that means not just the U.S., but other countries were also like, yeah, let's not really do any of this stuff. Number 8, environmental protection used to disguise ulterior motives. such as the Marine Reserve in Diego Garcia. I'm not educated on that particularly. Number 9, pollution is seen as a tradable commodity. This also relates to the whole cap and trade shit, where it's like, well, we'll have allotments of carbon, and the biggest corporations in the world will buy them all up and can keep polluting. Yay. Mm-hmm. China was opposed to 60% carbon emission reduction target during the Copenhagen 2010 talks. Number 11, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is one of the biggest ones. And
it's huge.
Yeah, and the next one is Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership, TTIP, and the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, TAFTA, and the Trade and Services Agreement, TISA. All of these were immense trade deals that included, that heavily impact environmental activism, environmentalism, regulation, because a lot of them say that basically corporations have control over what a country does, and if a country gets in the way of that corporation making profit, then they can bring them to this international tribunal of like 3 corrupt judges, and they will be the final ones to say whether a corporation can continue to exploit the world or a specific country, continue to pollute. And so these trade deals, like, seeing them for the average people in the world is very powerful and very important. And WikiLeaks was the only one to be able to reveal some or most of these agreements.
The only reason that we don't have TPP today in the U.S., well, it was obviously a multinational agreement, is because people found out about it through WikiLeaks and then were able to organize around it. Mm-hmm. These things were so heavily secret that even members of Congress didn't have access to the actual documents. And when finally it became, when some members of Congress, it's still not all of them, when some members of Congress were like, we need to read this shit, they would allow them to go into a fucking, sealed
hyperbaric
room.
chamber.
You weren't allowed to take anything to take pictures or even take notes. So you could look at the document, but you had to look at it in this, fucking CIA black site or something, with no way of taking that information and then sharing it onwards with constituents or the press or anything.
Right. You had to try and memorize what you found offensive about this document.
Which was,
about
thousands of pages long.
Thousands of pages of documentation. So just a couple more here. Iraq's city of Basra was heavily contaminated by war, oil, and radioactive weaponry. They revealed that. Dirty war for uranium and mineral rights in the Central African Republic. And finally, the suppressed Minton report on the Trafigura toxic dumping along the Ivory Coast. And I think that's the one that's connected to Australia. So that's why his home country hates him as well. Assange, that is. Anyway, these are immensely important news stories, government decisions, government doings that average people we're supposed to be an informed citizenry, supposedly, right? We're so proud of our democracy. Other countries don't have democracy, but we do. We get to stick a ballot in a box. Well, okay. Well, you got to show the people what the fuck you're doing. For us to have any kind of opinion on that vote, you got to show us what the fuck you're doing. But WikiLeaks was the only one actually showing us those things, and that's why they've crushed them.
Absolutely. And you can read more about each. We just kind of listed them, but you can read more about each specific topic. And I think it's worth noting as well that a lot of these that are listed on the WikiLeaks site show next to the topic which one of these are included in the extradition request. So, for instance, the government manipulation of countries into accepting climate strategy, that is one of the things that Assange is being formally extradited over. And, I'd say the majority of these, spying and surveillance to gain advantages in prior climate discussions. So much of this is also then tied to his current situation. Because again, it makes people look really shitty. The U.S. and EU quote, would need to neutralize, co-opt, or marginalize unhelpful countries such as Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Ecuador.
Quote unquote unhelpful.
All of these countries, the reason they're unhelpful, by the way, is because they'd been critical of past climate policies for being insufficient or undemocratic. That's how they're unhelpful. Because, helpful for the environment is really unhelpful for the U.S.
I hope when, in 50 or 100 years, when everyone's like, who the fuck's fault is it that we did nothing about this? I hope they just point the finger squarely at the United States and go, well, mainly theirs.
Yeah.
This is not to say every other country's been amazing on it. A lot of them have been shitty, but the United States has led the way in basically writing, allowing big oil to dictate our future.
Well, and it's scale, right? Like, there are a lot of countries that are shitty. My other home country of Sweden is shitty. But when Sweden does something shitty, it doesn't affect the majority of the world.
Right.
It will affect other countries, but when the U.S. does something really shitty, it affects almost the entire globe. So it's really about like the scale.
And they have the ability to pressure, because America is so large, at least economically, we have the ability to pressure all these other countries to fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
Sweden may do something shitty, but they can't then get 100 nations to say, oh, that's great.
Yeah. Speaking of 100 nations.
Okay.
The media is...
Oh, wow. I really nailed the number there.
You really did. I thought you did that for me.
No, I didn't.
To give me like that nice little chicane into the next topic. But never mind.
You know me, always setting up the segues. They call me the segue master.
Do they? So
specifically 100 nations do.
So this is from yesterday during the COP-26. 110 nations signed on to pledge to end deforestation by 2030. Now that sounds, oh my God, that sounds amazing, right?
I'm down. I like it.
And I mean, if you look at the COP26 website, what they signed talks about conserving forests, ensuring that that indigenous peoples and their lifeways are protected as well. And, making sure that there's sustainable development, which I don't really know what the fuck that means, but...
And the document says if they don't do it, if they don't abide by it, then they get their schlongs cut off.
Ow.
So, it's pretty harsh agreement.
And, I mean, it talks about, investing in protection and, what's it called? Like reclamation of deforested areas and things like that. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, wow, that sounds, I mean, it's not like as blunt as I would like it to be, but it sounds a step in the right direction. And I mean, Brazil and the US and Canada are all signatories of this fucking pledge. And that sounds so fucking great, right? All of these countries are, well, I don't know about all of them on the list, but the major ones are incredibly guilty of clear cutting and industrial logging, which unfortunately is not only not sustainable for climate change in general, but certainly not when your focus is on ending deforestation, which is really just the end of ending forests. Which you do by industrial logging and clear cutting.
You're saying, signing this agreement saying they're going to end deforestation, they're not talking about decreasing their clear cutting and shit?
There is no specific mention of clear cutting. It's all very vague language that speaks to, reduce vulnerability, what is it here?
Judging by your attitude, you've forgotten about the coins thrown in the fountain.
I did.
You're being very negative.
Promoting sustainable development and sustainable commodity production and consumption that works to countries' mutual benefit and that do not drive deforestation and land degradation. So again, it's all
keep doing everything you're doing.
Right.
But just, we're going to not deforest.
It's super vague. And of course, that it's written that way for a reason. Because if they were to actually say we're going to end industrial logging, that would, first of all, be necessary. Yeah. And second of all, that would completely upend some of the major industries in these countries that are signatories. So, for instance, I mentioned it on the show last week. My home country of Sweden has, in the past 60 years,
one of your home countries.
That's what I said. In the past 60 years, has clear cut almost 70% of their old growth forests, predominantly in areas that are the ancestral lands of the Sami, the indigenous people of the far north. So that doesn't sound like an end to deforestation. And that continues in Sweden, by the way. As we speak, there is industrial logging going on all across the U.S. This past summer, I was in Northern California where people are fighting industrial logging of, among other things, redwoods, which are, the most, some of the most mythical and recognizable trees in the world. They're the tallest trees in the world. They're absolutely fucking gorgeous. So if any, beautiful fucking tree was going to have a PR campaign around it to save it, it should be this one, and yet it's getting clear cut.
Yeah, honestly, if you've ever seen them, it's like fucking being in Narnia or some shit. It's like
really
crazy.
And, at the same time,
I caught an Ewok. I caught one.
I think you're combining stories.
No, they live in the redwoods.
Well, but they don't live in Narnia.
Oh no, yeah, I was the Narnia thing was separate, but I'm just saying I caught an Ewok.
Okay, so we're in Narnia Star Wars.
If you could stop mentioning Narnia, and we could just focus on the Ewoks, that would help a lot.
All right, fair. So we've also mentioned on the podcast Fairy Creek blockade, which is the blockade that's happening in around so-called Vancouver in Canada, which is another country that signed on to this pledge to end deforestation. And there has been absolutely fucking brutal crackdowns on those who are protecting these old growth forests from logging. So, I mean, there's several layers of shit here, right? First of all, it's old growth, which that means old growth means that it's never been logged before, which means that it is like this original forest that is incredibly rare.
Right. A lot of the trees take hundreds of years to grow. So if they're replanting, it's like you're going to plant saplings to replace a 500-year-old tree.
Right. In other words, you can't.
You're not solving that problem. Yeah.
It's death to that ecosystem. It's, if you want to get scientific about it, it's death to that carbon sink. Because obviously a fucking sapling is not going to be able to be the carbon sink that a giant fucking old growth tree was.
Right.
So scientifically speaking, and of course culturally speaking, regardless of what culture you're from, the beauty and the fucking magic around forests is something that pretty much any culture that lives in and around forests has. So this is a part of forests are tied to humanity in a very concrete, lifeways sense, but also in a very concrete cultural sense. And
another point on how clear it is that they're not going to actually abide by these promises, even if they were good promises, is that they always it's always we're going to do this by 2030, by 2050. Mm-hmm. So at almost all of these countries, with maybe the exception of a dictator or two, is going to have a different leader by that time. Joe Biden knows he'll be out of office, even if he were to, run as a corpse in this next term. He still is going to be out of office by then, and it'll be the next guy to deal with, to go, oops, we didn't meet the deforestation promise. They know they're not going to deal with it.
And Fairy Creek blockade put out a statement about specifically Canada's signing on to this agreement, saying that, quote, there are still trees 3 meters thick and 1,000 years old that remain on the chopping block, and this announcement does not curb large-scale clear-cutting of old growth. It just displaces it to other sections of forest. Old-growth forests in British Columbia store more carbon per hectare than any other ecosystem type in the world, except for a specific kind of forest that grows in Tasmania. On a per hectare basis, coastal forests around Fairy Creek store 1,300 metric tons of CO2 per hectare. They are more biodiverse than almost any other ecosystem in the world. And so they created a graph. You can look at it on Instagram. They created a graphic that looks at, what the legislation that they have now, which is basically fucking nothing, that protects old growth. And then their government, their British Columbia government, announced plans to start a process of consultations based off of recommendations. I mean, that sentence is just, it hurts my fucking brain.
That I've heard this said.
We're going to talking about doing something.
I've heard a lot of protests where they're like, "What do we want? Consultations. When do we want it? Now." It's all about consultations.
I agree. And they were saying that up to 2.6 million hectares might be temporarily deferred from logging, which, again, like, this is such a way of framing it, right?
Well, this is a tactic to deal with protest in all regards, not just with logging, is to just slow down the process, hoping that the protesters will go away or will fade or they'll have a tough time. You may get a lot of people excited about a cause for a minute, but it's very tough to maintain it over a year, 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they just elongate these things. Okay, we're not going to cut them down now, and then they slate it for the following year.
Right. And by the way, 2.6 million hectares is roughly 6.5 million acres, if you're wondering what the fuck a hectare is. And the Fairy Creek points out...
And if there's any hectares out there, we're not calling you fat.
And Fairy Creek points out that 2.6 million hectares sounds like a lot, right? Anytime we start talking about things in millions, we're like, wow, that's a lot. Like when a bank says they're going to pay a fine of like X amount $1 million, you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. And it's like, well, to you.
Right.
So this 2.6 million hectares represents roughly half of the at-risk old growth across just British Columbia. We're not even talking about Canada as a whole. We're talking about just British Columbia. There's more than 5 million hectares of at-risk old growth. And this this suggestion by the British Columbia government wouldn't just stop. It wouldn't say like, okay, we're not logging at all. They're saying, oh, okay, we'll leave some of this old growth alone, but we're just going to shift what we were going to log here to somewhere else. And it's like, okay, you could make the argument that logging in, a third or fourth growth, which means that it's been logged, a few times, so it's only 60, 100 years old or whatever. You could make the argument that that's better. But that's kind of like saying, instead of killing you, I'm going to put you in a coma. It's like, why don't you just leave me the fuck alone? And this is kind of what we're looking at here. So while Canada is, living it up in Glasgow, although I don't know that that's something you do in Glasgow. But anyway, while Canada is drinking whiskey.
I'm sure there's some Glaswegians out there who are living it up. In Canada, the fight to protect even the most like basic of what should be protected, these old growth forests that again have trees in them that are upwards of 1,000 years old. The fact that you would even consider cutting that down shows that you have absolutely no intention of protecting forests and actually pledging to end deforestation by 2030. Yeah. So COP-26, largely bullshit. I'm going to do a short segment about it on Redacted tonight. And yeah, it doesn't seem any different than the fucking 25 before it. I mean, it's almost like the higher the numbers get, the more you realize how little we've achieved.
Yeah, you've been doing this 26 times and you still have you've got like dick to show for it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to the next story. Speaking of polluters, I'll keep this one short, but Elon Musk was in the news. And by the way, this wasn't what I was going to focus on, but known for Tesla, known for switching cars to electric, right? It's supposed to be good for the planet. I remember seeing him at a conference saying, well, if by having Tesla around, it forces the automobile industry to switch to electric, let's say 10 years faster than it would have otherwise, think about how much that does for climate change. One rocket ship, one rocket trip to outer space in, his SpaceX shit has the greenhouse gas emissions of something like 500,000 Teslas for a year.
Teslas or cars?
Cars. Tesla is a car.
Right, but regular car, because does Tesla have a carbon emission?
No, you're saying the emission they've saved by switching to an electric car.
Okay. All right. I needed to wrap my head. Okay.
Yes, I didn't explain it well, maybe. Anyway, that was not my main point. My main point was that I saw an article about Elon Musk had tweeted at, one of the UN people in charge of
the higher ups
committee on food. No, the one that says, "Hey, we have a lot of people starving around the world." Anyway, he tweeted at him because the guy tweeted that you could end extreme poverty for $6 billion a year. End hunger around the world for $6 billion. And Elon Musk tweeted to him that he would pay the $6 billion if they gave him a clear plan on how $6 billion would end hunger. And
basically saying, I don't believe you. Show it to me.
Essentially. And so, some of the articles being written about this are like, Elon Musk offers to pay for ending hunger. And it's like, no, I think he was in a snarky way saying, listen, I'll fucking pay to end the hunger, but you don't have a plan to do it.
Right. That's basically a way of saying oh, this is bullshit. You're just throwing numbers out there to make, billionaires feel bad or to suggest that it wouldn't take that much and countries should do more about it. And I think it's bullshit, but it really is. You had a bit about this, didn't you? To end, it wasn't just hunger, was it? It was poverty or extreme poverty or something.
Extreme poverty
around the world. It would cost $20 billion a year.
Yeah, there were some estimates of $20 or $30 billion a year.
And it's because if you think about it, it really wouldn't cost that much because when you're below, you're not even down in the dirt. You're underground. It's so bad. In terms of the financial reality of so many humans on the earth, thanks to capitalism. Just the fact that we need finances to survive is fucking dumb. But so it actually wouldn't take that much money if you're looking at it compared to what countries spend daily on fucking arms. It wouldn't really take that much to lift all those boats,
Yeah, and if you just look at that number, $6 billion, it sounds insane to your average person, but it's 3% or something of Elon Musk's worth. It's not even that big a thing to him. Mm-hmm. It'd be like someone making $100,000 a year donating $1,000. Honestly, that's how insane this is. He could end world hunger with a tiny percentage of his savings of his net worth.
It's a sixth of what he made in one day, a couple weeks ago. He made $36 billion in one day. So honestly, it would be if you looked at your, if you looked at the breakdown of your pay stub and you saw that in one day you made X amount of money, and then you just took 1/6 of that and you gave it to some fucking charity. That's basically what the fuck we're talking about.
Right. And yet he is not. I imagine. Listen, if he gives the $6 billion, I will fucking run around being Elon Musk fucking was true to his word. Incredible.
Still a douche.
Oh yeah, I'll still talk about how he's a douche in other ways. But listen, and also there's a whole discussion to be had about billionaires won't save us.
Saving the day, right?
You can't have a villainous system like this where people are ridiculously, insanely wealthy while other people starve, and then when they give a little bit to stop some of that starving, you go, oh, what a hero. So I'm not saying billionaires will save us, but I'm just saying if he actually does this, I will cover the fact that he's done it. I don't think he's actually going to do it. I think he was being snarky in like a you can't actually prove it'll do anything kind of way. But it just goes to show like how little is truthfully required to like end world hunger for the year.
Totally.
And on top of that, there's the fact that he seems to find this like funny. Like it's I mean, what a sack of shit, but
it's a game for him. Excuse me. Speaking of people failing at things,
have we ever discussed someone failing at something?
the EPA and the larger government of the United States is just failing miserably at its job. So this was a multi-year report that ProPublica published. And you can also find this link over at radindiemedia.com. It's up there.
Oh my God, that's my favorite news source.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Radindiemedia.com.
It's rad. So ProPublica journalists analyzed billions of rows of EPA data to do something that the agency has never done before, and that is map the spread of cancer-causing industrial air emissions down to the neighborhood level across the country.
That many data points it makes me tired just thinking about it.
Across the country. It's fucking remarkable, and I am so grateful that there are people like ProPublica out there because this is really fucking important work because of course the EPA is not doing it.
Thank you, nerds at ProPublica.
I know, right?
Yeah, our government won't do it. But.
No, and that's the fucked up thing is the EPA has this data and they do nothing with it. So, and this is something you'll see across other agencies too. Like housing will say that they do this. Energy and agriculture will say, well, we've collected all this data. Okay, what are you doing with it? Again, it's like if a doctor said, hey, look, we're going to have to amputate your leg if you don't do this. And you're like, okay, I've received that data. I'm doing nothing with it.
Well, I kind of said this to you a few days ago where I've always wondered, like, the data must be out there on areas where cancer is far more common. And and I was thinking like, smog in LA or stuff in New York or whatever. And you could find out, hey, this area of a city is clearly really high in cancer rates, and people could use that information to move out of that fucking area or to figure out what it is that's causing that cancer. But instead, and like they must know those things, like that data's out there. But instead, you never hear a city talking about, or even the federal government talking about, this city's totally causing cancer, or this area, tons of people get cancer, because they don't want people to know that. They don't want people to move out of their city. They don't want to make the fact that you're much higher likelihood of getting cancer known. So this seems close to what I was talking about, is like, it's going to take someone else to go through the data.
Totally. And of course, a big problem here, which is something ProPublica mentions, is, again, the intersections on this issue. Most of the people who live in these areas are poor, predominantly not white, and don't have the money to move. So, I mean, it's not like the article that they that they put out in conjunction with this report shares some stories of, there's one woman who's 6 months pregnant, and every day, twice a day, she gives her niece asthma treatment, because her niece has severe asthma because they live so close to an incredibly polluted and polluting chemical plant. And again, she's 6 months pregnant. She doesn't want to be there, right. But there's no like, where the fuck are you gonna go? You have no money.
Right, exactly. Moving. A lot of people think that you should move out of there. There are many people in this country that basically spend their paycheck as they make it, like live day to day on that paycheck. Mm-hmm. They don't have, hundreds of dollars for a moving truck, or the amount of money to put down on a new place, or like there's so many costs to moving and uprooting yourself. Not to mention, of course, is the fact maybe you have a lot of loved ones there. You don't want to fucking move. But for people wondering, and we mentioned this before, why it is that these are mainly people of color in these areas. Is it that black people just love living in polluted areas? No, there's two main reasons. Statistically speaking, people of color are have far less wealth in their family. In some areas, I remember in Boston, the median savings of a black family was $8. and the median savings of a white family was like 100,000 or 60,000 or something like that. But anyway, so far less likely to have much money. Therefore, they are living in areas where the housing is less expensive, so that is often the most polluted areas. But more importantly, often they lived there or their family lived there before it became polluted, and it became polluted. It became a corporate sacrifice zone because these corporations know that they can go into areas that are predominantly not white and they'll have far less resistance because people who are not white have less political power. They have less money to throw at the problem. It's just going to be less of a battle for them. So these companies, massive corporations, go, let's put our pipeline there. Let's put our fucking, toxic mill there. Let's put our industrial zone there because we won't have to fight these people,
Yeah, it's the same thing that you saw happen with DAPL. It was originally slated to go through Bismarck, North Dakota, which is pretty white. And so then there was some pulling of the political strings. And then the company was like, okay, we'll go through Indian country because who the fuck cares?
Yeah.
And also to your point about, just moving, the places where people can move to, guess what? They are going to be poor sacrifice zones.
Right.
Is it really going to help you to move from one sacrifice zone to the other? So again, this report is fucking astonishing. Whether you want to go on there and look at how your area fares is up to you. I did because I'm a morbid bastard. But I think that, this information is power in so many ways. And I think it's important that we know about the localized effects of this climate chaos and understanding that there are a lot of things that we can do locally that will have, ripple effects throughout.
And it's like we're not trying to just give people bad news, but I'm a strong believer in people deserve all the information that they can get about their lives and about where they live and what's going on. Yeah, it should be their right. And the mainstream media is not going to do it. So, we're trying to do that for you.
So, again, they mapped toxic air pollution from industrial facilities across every neighborhood in the country and identified more than 1,000 hotspots of cancer-causing air. And again, the EPA does collect data from industrial facilities for the most part, but it does fucking nothing with it. And as a result, people don't have information, particularly when you look at compounding effects. So, for instance, in where I grew up, Charlotte, in and around Charlotte, there are a shit ton of these industrial polluting facilities, and one is bad. But if you live at the cross section where the effects from multiple of these facilities are hitting your home, well, that's compounding effects, right? And that needs to be studied as well. That needs to be brought into account. And so ProPublica found that nearly all of the 20 hotspots, the top 20 hotspots, are located in southern states, known for looser environmental regulations, and a quarter of the top hotspots are in Texas.
That's incredible. A quarter in one state.
In Black census tracts, the estimated cancer risk from toxic air pollution is more than double that of majority white areas. Now, an interesting point here, the Clean Air Act is supposed, some people listening might be like, but what about the Clean Air Act? Yeah. The problem with the Clean Air Act is that, it looks at a certain amount or a certain list of pollutants. And as ProPublica writes, quote, but 187 other dangerous chemicals, now known as hazardous air pollutants or air toxins, never got this attention. At the time, the science demonstrating the harms of these compounds, which primarily impact people in neighborhoods that border industrial facilities, was still in its early stages. And they say that the EPA did not set the same strict limits, and industry lobbying weakened the agency's emerging regulations. So there are There are like almost 200 other chemicals that are not a part of the Clean Air Act, that are part of, you know, ProPublica's research that have been shown to cause cancer. So this isn't just like, oh, you might get some asthma or some shit. Like, this is shit that actually breaks down your body's ability to function at all. And so these areas are predominantly black and brown areas, people who live closest to these facilities. And it is mind-boggling to look at this map. It is really difficult to read the article. I will say that, you know, trigger warning for sure. But again, I think it's necessary. And I'll just share one of the stories that they share in the article. Brittany Madison, she's the woman who's 6 months pregnant. She lives in Baytown, Texas. Her apartment is within 30 miles of more than 170 facilities that give off toxic chemical emissions. I will also point out that Brittany is black. And these there are three facilities that are really quite close to her home. And there are three facilities that are accountable for most of the estimated industrial cancer risk on her block. The ExxonMobil refinery, that's less than 3 miles from her apartment, churns out heavy metals such as nickel, cobalt, and zinc. The refinery individually increases the estimated risk of getting cancer to 1 in 730,000. And now the EPA says that any cancer risk that is more than 1 in a million needs to be highlighted and needs to be addressed and basically, like, you know, stopped. And basically ProPublica's point is like, well, almost all of these places that we've looked at are, you know, below that threshold or above that threshold. It's 1 in 730,000 as opposed to 1 in a million.
Right.
Across the bay in Pasadena, Texas, there's a facility that spews ethylene oxide. The plant independently increases the estimated cancer risk to 1 in 217,000. Nearby,
I love ethylene oxide.
Nearby,
Sometimes I'll just
there's
snort
another facility that spews ethylene oxide, which is an additional increase to 1 in 134,000. When the emissions from all of these three facilities, plus the other facilities in the area, are added together, the estimated additional cancer risk on Madison's block is 1 in 46,000. Now, again, as I pointed out, the 1 in 46,000, as ProPublica points out, anything like beyond 1 in a million is supposed to be cause for significant alarm.
Right.
So we're looking at 1 in 46,000 for this one person.
And it's compounded cancer risks. So if you have multiple things in the air, if you have multiple things in the water, if you have multiple, you know, various risks in that area, then your odds of getting cancer just go up astronomically.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I recommend that folks check out. I mean, I could spend, you know, the rest of my day just reading and sharing information from this very important report. But I would suggest that everyone take a look at it. Again, it's up at ProPublica, and it's also at radndmedia.com.
Yeah, check it out. So let's see, squeeze one more story in here. Glenn Greenwald has been talking about something, which basically is talking about the Washington Post is bending over backwards to protect Anthony Fauci on something that you would not think he needs protection on.
Well, right, and this is basically, I wanted to. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Whew.
Well, it just got interesting.
It's just there's.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's
okay. Cool. I'm not gonna like vomit in the middle of this podcast. It's just.
She actually already did, but luckily you didn't see it.
It's just a bit of bit of air caught in the what do you call it?
Larynx?
Whatever. Anyway, so this is also on radindamedia.com for all of you news nerds out there. So this is something that Glenn Greenwald had actually reported on many years ago. Well, not many years ago, a few years ago. And this was the use, I'm going to say trigger warning here. This has to do with torturing animals, in particular dogs.
Which most people don't know is listed as one of the pastimes on the back of the American flag.
What? Oh my God! What else is listed on the back of the American flag? I had no idea.
Cooing socialist countries
and torturing dogs,
sending children into mines.
So just wanted to share that trigger warning with folks. So basically, this issue, there's a U.S. industry of dog experimentation. And this is basically where dogs are bred for the sole purpose of often torturous experimentation, after which the dogs are killed because, quote, they're no longer of use. Yeah. So,
and yet we mock other countries that sometimes eat dogs, but we're fine with.
I know we're going to torture them.
Yeah,
so back in 2018, Glenn Greenwald actually reported on these and also produced a 2-minute video report that basically showed this really excruciating torture, and basically like leaked this information for really the first time. Folks really got to see that this is part of our animal testing industry.
And by the way, folks, when Glenn Greenwald was at The Intercept, they were one of the only places that would cover the horrors of factory farming. Most all other and I don't think they've done it since he left, but all other major outlets are just refuse to talk about what goes on in factory farming. So anyway, little side note.
And I'm going to spare you some of the details that he shares, because you can read it, and I don't need to say it out loud, because it is horrific. Some of the things that they do to these animals. And so there's this organization called the White Coat Waste Project that it's among several advocacy groups that have been working for years to end this experimentation. But they have found particular success by bringing together the right and the left on this issue. The left, because, we typically don't like to torture living things. And then the right, because they are devoid of any humanity. They're like, well, this isn't a good use of taxpayer money. So, I'm serious. That's their argument. But the White Coat Waste Project, to their, basically, what do you call it? To their...
I don't know. To their credit.
To their credit. Thank you.
I was like, to their pantaloons?
What is it with you and pants today?
Today's all about pantaloons.
The White Coat Waste Project really found a way to join these sides and actually get Democrat and Republican members of Congress to sign on to campaigns to end this experimentation on animals. They're funded primarily through small donor grassroots support. And they're very open about their funding. They're very open about their demands, what they want, et cetera, et cetera. And in the past, the Washington Post has been, really kind to them and, talking about how important it is to end experimentation like this. And this is fucking grotesque and yada, 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 yada.
I mean, yeah, it's straight up torture. It's an effort to end torture.
Right. So now the Washington Post has changed its tune. Why, you might ask? Are they all of a sudden pro-torture?
Right now they're prepping an attack piece on the White Coats Waste Project.
So Dr. Fauci, you might know him as the dude who...
As America's grandpa.
Which I really don't understand why people are in love with Fauci.
Oh my God. It's like, look, you can want us to deal with this pandemic appropriately. You don't have to fucking hero worship this guy.
I know, seriously. And also, he started by saying that you don't need to wear masks. So let's not whitewash even recent history here. So I think it's just because Trump was mean to him. That's why everyone loves him.
Yeah, that's probably part of it.
It's like he was bullied by Trump, and so
Also,
now he's
he was
everyone's
kind
fucking
of
darling.
he was bullied by Trump for some of it. Through a lot of it, he was standing boldly, like proudly next to Trump. So it's like through a lot of this shit. So it's like, what? Like, if you're a real human being, shouldn't you be so disgusted by Trump that you aren't standing there like, I love this guy? Anyway, side note.
There's a lot to
Let's get back on track.
There's a lot to not love. But anyway, so Dr. Fauci is the director. His title is the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and he's President Biden's chief medical advisor. So this means...
Which Biden needs a lot of medical advisors.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's helping.
He's like, my arm seems to have fallen off. We'll sew that back on, Mr. President.
Many of, as Greenwald writes, quote, many of the most horrific experiments, including the ones on dogs and puppies now in the news as a result of white coats activism, are conducted by agencies that are under Fauci's command and are funded by budgets that he controls.
Christ. He's literally a dog torturer. All right.
So now white coats activism is reflecting poorly on everyone's favorite fucking liberal hero, Dr. Fauci. So as a result, the Washington Post has amassed a team, like, I'm not kidding, like a team of reporters to attack the group. The same one that they've in the past said is doing great work, in order to falsely smear it as a right-wing extremist group motivated not by a genuine concern for the welfare of animals or wasteful government spending, but rather due to a partisan desire based in MAGA ideology to attack Fauci.
Wow. So the reason they know this attack piece is coming is because when an outfit like the Washington Post is preparing for an attack piece, they send these questions to people, and you can tell by the wording of the questions whether it's going to be an attack piece or not. And I actually, when the New York Times was coming after me, a owner of a comedy club contacted me and said, "Hey Lee, I got these questions from the New York Times and I answered them, but it seems like it's going to be a negative piece," because he kept asking questions like, would you book Lee Camp? Why won't you book him? And I tried to explain to him that I didn't say we wouldn't book you. I said we wouldn't book a headliner on Saturdays because we don't have headliners on Saturdays. We have a bunch of comedians. And so he kept saying, so you wouldn't book Lee to headline. Like, he kept trying to push this comedy club owner to say they wouldn't book me when that was not what the guy was saying. Anyway, that's an example of how a hit piece is coming. And so here's one of the questions that these organizations have gotten. It's, will you please disclose your largest individual donors to your organization? Have you turned donations away from pro-Trump or conservative groups? So basically, it's trying to paint this group as being funded by Trumpers, wealthy Trumpers. And why would they even want to do that investigation? Like, it's clear the only reason that they have completely flip-flopped on how they view this organization is because Fauci's the one fucking torturing dogs. Like, that's the only reasoning.
Well, and Greenwald also points out that this one reporter who's part of this team, Beth Reinhardt, who's a I hesitate to say reporter, a fucking, witch hunter. She specifically asked for a wide range of financial documents relating to the group's funding far beyond what nonprofit groups typically disclose. But White Coat, this project was like, all right, fine. So they gave her, Schedule Bs, whatever the fuck that is. They showed her their 2020 filing with the IRS. They sent her a breakdown of funding sources, and basically they shared all of this information to prove where their money was coming from, but she kept going at them because basically they weren't giving her anything to work with. There's no fucking there's no gotcha moment in the shit that they were sending her. So instead she had to twist the questions, like, have you turned donations away from pro-Trump or conservative groups whom I would expect would embrace your campaign targeting Fauci? That is how she phrased that question.
Which is not a campaign targeting Fauci. It just happens that he is the one fucking overseeing, like, meaning he's the one in charge of the organization that's funding these torture
Well, but
programs.
it's also one of those questions like, when did you beat your wife?
Well, also, what group?
It doesn't give them a chance, because if they say we haven't turned donations away,
Right.
then they're saying yes to, like, yes, this is a campaign targeting Fauci, because like the way that question is phrased
Right.
presupposes that the campaign is about Fauci, when it's still, as it's always been, about
Also-
these fucking dogs.
Also, please show me any group, just about any organization, really, that when they get a donation, says to the donor, "Excuse me, do you like Donald Trump?" Even though it has nothing to do with what you just donated to. And if they say yes, we say we're sending the money back. I have never fucking heard of such a thing.
Right.
I mean, for example, because this podcast has no ads, we accept members. When you guys become a member at liberapay.com, we don't send you an email saying, "Hold on, do you support Trump?" And wait for your response. And then if you say yes, we say, "Here's your fucking money back." Like, that's not a thing.
No, and furthermore, White Coat, like in their documents, if you look at them, it shows that the average donation last year in 2020 was $30.
What a horrible organization.
Obtained by roughly 81,000 individual donations. The group did not take any PPP bailout funds, and has no like super PAC money or anything like that you'd expect from this, evil conglomerate that's going after Fauci. So basically, this is just one of those really sterling examples of how corporate media is not only used to uphold people in power, regardless of whose blood they have on their hands and what they're doing, but also they have no actual moral compass. They have no fucking, like, they are literally going after an organization that goes after the torture of dogs and puppies.
Right.
Like, it is so, like, I feel like this is a joke, like, it would be like going after an organization that wants to end torturing puppies. Like, it sounds so fucking absurd.
Like an exaggeration, yeah.
Like, it sounds like a joke, but literally the Washington Post is trying to take
malign.
down an organization that's like, hey, could you just stop torturing puppies, please?
Torturing and killing, by the way.
Right.
And I also have an experience with the Washington Post, and they're kind of like, "Oh, wait, your answers didn't work for our hit piece we were trying to mock up." So this is back when Redacted Tonight was kind of just starting. I think it was the first year. A young reporter at the Washington Post magazine wanted to do, I guess they do these one-page things that have a nice photo spread, and it's like it's basically only it's a short interview. It's one page, but even that is like, if you were to actually put the print together, it'd be like a paragraph, basically. And I guess she found out that we tape Redacted Tonight in D.C., and she was like, "Oh, well, we're the Washington Post. This is an interesting D.C. thing." So she emailed me. She came to the show, watched a live show taping with the audience. Then we sat down for like an hour interview where we had a very friendly interview. And she was like, "This is so cool." The closest, she was like, I didn't know anything like this taped in DC. This is so cool. The closest she had to a got you question was where she goes, "You seem to dislike the mainstream media. I'm with the mainstream media. What am I doing wrong?" Or something like that. That was the closest to a gotcha. There was no gotcha in it. It was a positive piece on me doing Redacted Tonight. Clearly, at some point, she brings this back to her editor, and the editor goes, "Hold on, you interviewed someone from RT America? That's dirty Russian shit. We got to attack it like it's dirty Russian shit. What you got to, oh my God, we don't have a anti-Russian hit piece at all here." And so she calls me back, and I'm assuming this is going to be basically the same person I talked to before. And it quickly becomes apparent from the phone call that she has gotten instructions to be like, you work for RT, dirty Russian propaganda. Are you not doing propaganda? And I was like, what the fuck just happened to you? Jesus Christ. And And even then, I wasn't giving her the answer she wanted because she wanted to hear about how people told me what to say. People wrote my material. I was told what not to say. When in fact, I've never been told what to say. I've never been told what not to say. No one writes my stuff except for me, and I've never been censored there.
But Lee, that doesn't work with our piece.
I know. So it got very contentious because she was not getting what she wanted, which was for me to say how heavily censored I am. And anyway, they published the piece, but they ended up making like a third of it just like, you work for RT America, what's that like? You know, where the question basically indicts you without, it doesn't matter what the answer is.
Well, and also I couldn't help but notice that the picture that they used, which, I mean, you look fantastic, but you also look a little bit like Rasputin. And
I mean, I'm a little evil looking at times.
They definitely, like, on purpose went with, like, how can we make this guy look like Dracula? And
well, they took photos, and then they took the photos and like painted them or added a paint filter or something. So it took, and look, I wasn't smiling. I was intending to look intense. So it's not like they took me skipping through a meadow and made it, you know, me torturing beagles. But so I was intending to look intense, but they like basically by adding this paint filter accentuated the shadows on my face to make it look like Rasputin or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. It's very transparent. And again, like, media literacy, folks, like, that's why it's so fucking important, because this shit is meant to wash over you without you noticing, without you saying, wait, shit, there's bullshit all over me. It's meant
it got all over me.
It's meant to, like, infect your brain. And that's why it's so important that, like, that we have media literacy so that we can recognize, wait, how are you trying to twist it being bad to be against animal torture? I don't understand. Like, and someone with the group, the White Coat Waste Project, told Greenwald when he interviewed him, quote, apparently for some, disparaging Anthony Fauci for funding the abuse of puppies is a bridge too far. But to suggest that we're out to accomplish anything other than save animals from abuse is simply not true, nor supported by any actual evidence. And I mean, that's the bottom line, is that the Post is going after them because their work has now included Fauci. When, of course, their work was ongoing before Fauci was, you know, a part of this conversation at all. And so again, like, media literacy is fucking vital, and there's really not enough of it. And we really have to stay vigilant in terms of what we're taking in. And that's why Rad Indie Media is so good, because we pull from sources that have very high standards and don't pull this kind of shit. There is a very strong, very strong journalistic integrity with all of the people whose work we share. And there is there's no intent on protecting the powers that be. There's no intent on trying to twist the truth in order to protect specific organizations or protect specific people. So this is, again, something that's really, really fucking vital, and something that we need to work on and share in our communities.
And we're going to leave it there for now, folks. But as we mentioned, we have no ads, we have no sponsors or anything for this show, so it all comes down to you. If you feel like you got $1, honestly, if you were drinking a coffee to this and you feel like we also deserve a coffee, then
tell me where you can find $1 coffee these days.
That's true. Go to liberapay.com/Lee Camp, LIBERAPAY.com/Lee Camp. You can join up there. Also, we do a little solidarity fund where all the YouTube donations go to people who are struggling. So if that is you, you can email commoncensored, that's ED at the end of that, commoncensored, at protonmail.com, and you can let us know that you would like to benefit from the Solidarity Fund. We're not talking millions of dollars. The average we're able to get to people is about $80 if they need some help. So that's for you. if you're struggling. And radindiemedia.com. Already said that. Please join the email while you're over there so that we can email you with the top stories of the day each and every day. And it's just one email a day, and you can get all your best stories, and then you don't have to worry about all the bullshit. So that's easy. What else?
I'm at artkillingapathy.com. You're at leecamp.com.
Wait, I'm what? Oh, shit. I'm in the wrong place. leecamp.com. If you need Redacted Tonight or any of that stuff, at leecamp on Twitter, at Radical Eleanor on Twitter. There's a 50-50 chance we'll do a live stream this Sunday. We'll try and let you know about that. And, keep fighting.
Act out.